Hello everyone, I am the storyteller. Tonight I'll tell you a story filled with dread, mystery, and something far older than fear and experience. Dr. Elias Thorne would never forget after traveling to a dying town hidden in the desert. Relax, listen to the wind whisper through dry canyons, and discover what happened when he stepped into Hollow Creek. And the spiral remembered his name. They told me the fault lines here were dead. No tremors, no records, no reason for a man like me to come crawling out past civilization's last breath just to read dust and shadows. But something moves beneath Hollow Creek, not fast, not loud, but deep, a sound I can only describe as remembering. Not like a nudge, but like how you know you've forgotten something important. It began with a fracture in the rock, one I thought I could explain. That was my first mistake. Thinking this was about rocks, thinking this was about science. It ends with a name carved into the canyon wall, mine, etched beside dates that haven't happened yet. If you're hearing this, turn back. Don't follow the map, don't follow me, because the frontier never ended, it just went under. I hit Hollow Creek just after sundown. The road in had been little more than a bone trail, a dirt scar winding through scrub and stone, surrounded by cliffs that rose like ruined teeth. My rental Jeep coughed gravel at every pothole, suspension howling like it resented me. The sun hung heavy and warped behind the canyon rim, bleeding orange into the sky, and for a moment the entire landscape looked scorched, not by fire, but by memory. There were no other cars, no signs of recent tire tracks, just a solitary vulture perched on a telephone pole, wires sagging like dead veins. I'd been told the town had a population of 312. It felt more like a forgotten echo. I'm Dr. Elias Thorne, seismologist, 47, university appointed, rational, educated, skeptical. All the things I told myself as the GPS blinked out and refused to come back. I wasn't here to chase ghosts or dig up bones, just record unusual ground patterns and report back. I kept telling myself that. The Hollow Creek welcome sign had fallen sideways and been hastily righted with fence wire. Its paint was sun-faded, chipped in a way that made the smiling prospector mascot look like he'd been peeling off his own face. Below it, and red spray paint. We don't forget, cute, real tourism friendly. The town itself sat sunken at the heart of the canyon basin, as if it had tried to crawl away from the sky and failed. Dust clouded the streets like restless spirits. Wood-shingled buildings sagged on their foundations, most shuttered or collapsing in on themselves. A single blinking neon sign, Ashby's Feed and General, pulsed in the distance like the last heartbeat of a dying animal, and yet ... I stayed. I checked in at the lone motel, the Creekside Inn, though there was no creek and very little inn. The receptionist, a sallow-eyed man with hands that looked dipped in motor oil, handed me a rusted key and offered a warning with a smile that never reached his eyes. Don't go out after dark, Doc. Light plays tricks on you out here. I asked about the seismic readings. If anyone else had felt tremors. He nodded too quickly. Oh sure, the land's always talking, just not always in words you want to hear. Then he walked off before I could press. I tried to settle into the room, but something felt off. The bed had for legs, but listed slightly downhill. The light flickered even when switched off, and the wallpaper ... A faded pattern of interlocking triangles, like teeth, like a trap, repeated over and over. I wrote it off. Travel fatigue. Too many hours staring at fault maps and stratigraphic models. I ran a baseline scan with my portable geophone and tried to call out to confirm reception with the university. Static, then silence, and then came the first tremor. Not on the machine, not on the scale, but in the bones. A low shudder, like the ground itself sigh, and I swear the lights pulsed in time with it, just for a second, enough to convince me I imagined it. But something inside me shifted. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard a sound from beneath the floorboards, a ticking, like an old watch winding itself. Soft and constant, not mechanical, organic. And outside my window, beyond the veil of dust and dusk, a figure stood on the ridge above the town. Motionless, watching, I told myself it was nothing. Just the dark, the isolation, the mind playing tricks. But the thing is, I hadn't told anyone I was coming, not even the university. And that figure, it looked exactly like my grandfather, the one who disappeared in Hollow Creek in 1971. Sleep was thin, the kind where your body rests, but your mind stays braced, coiled, listening. I woke before dawn, sweat cold against my neck. My dreams had been jagged fragments, red, dust falling upward, a tunnel of hands clawing through bedrock, my own voice calling from inside a stone. But what stuck with me most was the sound, the ticking again, that same rhythmic click, click, click. Like a watch buried in my skull, I sat up fast. The motel room was quiet, dead quiet. Even the crickets had stopped singing. Then I noticed something on the knitstand that hadn't been there the night before. A pocket watch, old, brass, tarnished, familiar in a way that twisted my gut. I picked it up with hesitation, like it might bite. The back was engraved, W.T. 1889 W.T. William Thorne, my grandfather's grandfather. I hadn't seen that watch since I was a kid, when my grandfather used to keep it in a lockbox, claiming it ran on canyon time. After he vanished, my family searched everywhere. It was never found. Until now, I should have been alarmed, panicked, but instead, a cold curiosity slipped over me like dust settling in a grave. I opened it. No hands, no ticking. But I could feel it ticking in my palm. I left the room outside. The wine dragged thin trails of sand across the empty street like faded memories trying to reassert themselves. The light here had a strange texture, grainy, like old film stock. Ashby's Feed and General was the only store open. Inside smelled of leather, dry grain, and mildew. The aisles were cluttered with goods that looked more like leftovers from 100 years ago. Mason jars of pickled things that might have once been vegetables, hand-wound radios, rusted oil lamps. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 60s. Her eyes were milky with cataracts, but she looked directly at me the moment I walked in. "You've got the Thorne face," she said. I froze. "Excuse me, you heard me, boy, William, Jonas, Caleb, you. All of you got the same worrying behind the brow, like you've already seen how it ends." I asked how she knew them. She didn't answer. Instead, she set down a small tin of chewing tobacco and said, "They all heard the ticking, too. Best not to listen." I didn't buy anything. I didn't ask questions. I just walked out, pocket watch clenched tight. I spent the afternoon hiking the perimeter of the canyon, setting up seismic sensors and triangulating the epicenter of the tremors. The readings were inconsistent, intermittent pulses that suggested not tectonic stress but something else. Rhythmic, patterned, almost like breathing. Beneath the rock, at 3:14 p.m., the sensors all spiked simultaneously. The ground didn't shake, but my head did. A flash of vertigo hit me so hard I had to drop to one knee. And when I stood, the landscape had shifted. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean literally. Boulders that had been on one side of the trail were on the other. The cliff face had changed color. Even the shadows were falling at the wrong angle for the sun's position. I staggered back toward town, pulse hammering. That's when I saw the mine entrance. It hadn't been on the map, hadn't been there 20 minutes ago. A narrow opening in the rock wall, black as sleep. An iron placard nailed to the wood support beam above the entrance read, Hollow No. 3. Sealed 1932. There were no footprints, no signs of recent use, but something about it called to me. Not like a voice, but like gravity, a slow draw inward. The air leaking from the opening carried a smell I couldn't place. Whetstone, ozone, and something sweet and rotten, like spoiled honey. I didn't go in, not yet, but I left a geophone just outside, hidden in the rockfall. When I checked it before sunset, it had recorded something impossible, not tremors, voices, whispers layered over each other, distorted and slow, repeating a single phrase I couldn't understand, except for the last word, ... Thorn. That night I dreamed again, but it wasn't like before. It felt real. I was standing in a house I didn't recognize, but somehow knew. All lamp flickering, wallpaper peeling in strips. The air smelled of blood and coal, and the watch was ticking. A man stood across from me, broad-shouldered, heavy beard, eyes dark and sunken. He held a pickaxe in one hand. The other cradled the watch. You came back, he rasped. I asked who he was. He didn't answer, just raised the pickaxe and pointed to the floor, where the boards curled upward like fingers. Don't dig, it remembers. I woke with the sheets twisted around my legs and my mouth full of dust. The pocket watch lay open on my chest, and it was ticking again. I spent the next morning trying to prove I hadn't lost my mind. I reviewed the seismic data from all 6 geophones. 5 of them recorded nothing. Flat lines, like the desert was a corpse that had never breathed. But the 6th, the one I left at the mine entrance, had a reading I still don't have language for. It looked like a tremor at first, a shallow pulse, but buried within it were irregular waveforms, too structured, too self-similar. It pulsed in triplets, spaced at roughly 90 seconds apart, and then the waveform ... curved, folded back on itself. That's not how geology works. I cleaned the dust off the recorder and played the audio again. The whispers returned, faint, wrong speed, underwater. Voices stacked like sediment. I boosted the gain. This time I could hear breathing, labored, human, and buried beneath it. Find the map. Find the wound. I nearly dropped the device. Ashby's wasn't open. When I returned, the blinds were drawn. A small cardboard sign in the window read, Closed for observation. The streets were empty except for a teenage girl drawing symbols in the dirt with a broken piece of chalk. When I approached, She didn't look up, just said, "They come out when the sun hits the rim at a clean angle." I asked who. She looked me straight in the eye and whispered, "The ones who can't tie properly." Then she crushed the chalk with her heel and skipped off, humming something low and dissonant. I found the town library in what used to be a church. The stained glass had been replaced with boards, but a faint rainbow of dust still hung in the air like light was trying to remember what it used to be. Inside, mildew, silence, and shelves that leaned like they'd survived multiple apocalypses. The librarian was a woman in her 80s, dressed in dusty lace, sitting completely still at a desk covered in dead flies. I cleared my throat. Nothing. Then she said, without looking up, "All history here is written twice, once in ink, once in dirt. You'll need to read both if you want to live." I asked about old maps, mine records, anything geological. She nodded slowly, motioned toward the basement. The stairs groaned under me like a mouth slowly chewing. Below was a stone cellar, humid and sour. No lighting, but a single bare bulb swinging like it couldn't decide on a direction. And stacked along the walls were rolled maps, surveyor logs, and something else, folders tied shut with red twine, labeled in pencil, "Disappeared 1931, Dream Reports 1974. Hollow below." I took what I could carry. When I turned to leave, the bulb flickered, and for a fraction of a second, the far wall moved, like it was breathing. Back in the motel, I unrolled the oldest map. It was a surveyor's layout from 1887, drawn by a man named Caleb Thorne, my great-great-grandfather. The map showed the town's original grid, the mine shafts, and a series of unlabeled X's beyond the known trail system. One of those X's matched the exact location of the mine entrance I'd found. Next to it, in tiny ink letters, a phrase so faint I missed it twice. "The mouth under the mountain. Do not return." That night, my dream was worse. I was back in the mine, deeper now. The air was thick with rot and static. The walls pulsed, not with light, but with memory. Like the rock itself was remembering blood, I walked deeper, following the sound of the wash, now thunderous, echoing. And then I saw it, a pit carved in concentric spirals, descending into black. At the bottom stood a version of me, older, filth-covered, holding a child's hand. I couldn't see the child's face, just their eyes, luminous, unblinking, and filled with recognition. The older me looked up. "Digging isn't discovery," he said. "It's invitation." I screamed myself awake. And this time, when I looked at the pocket watch, I saw a second engraving inside the lid I swear hadn't been there before. "You were always here." I don't know what that mine is, or what my family did, or what this place really is beneath the canyon and the dirt and the stories. But I know this now: the town isn't on the map because it moves, and the thing under it, the thing I can feel waiting, it's not asleep, it's watching. It took 3 cups of motel coffee, lukewarm and burnt, before I could piece together what I'd seen. The dreams weren't symbolic, they were memories, was something close, inherited recollections, like trauma passed down through marrow. I could feel them now even while awake, moments where I knew a thing before I read it, or tasted the name of a place I hadn't learned yet. By noon, the air had turned electric again, a dry, buzzing pressure like the atmosphere itself was tightening, and someone was waiting for me outside the door. He was tall, late 30s maybe, clean-shaven, sharp eyes, wore an old cavalry-style duster and a flat-brimmed hat like he'd step out of time. Called himself Jacob. "You're Thorne's boy," he said. I asked how he knew. He just smiled to why and handed me a manila envelope without another word. Inside, black and white photographs, 8 of them, all of the same location, a shallow grave site and a sun-baked gully. The first photo showed nothing but cracked dirt. The second, a set of faint boot prints. By the fourth image, bones were surfacing, but not human, not animal either. The ribs bent wrong, the skull looked wrong. It was shaped like a bell. I looked up, ready to ask a dozen questions, but Jacob was gone. No sound of boots, no dust trail, just ... gone. I took the photos to the only place I hadn't gone yet, the funeral home. Whitlow and Sons, silent services since 1882. It was run by a man named Thomas Whitlow, mid-70s, immaculately dressed. Thin white gloves, voice like sand poured into velvet. He welcomed me without surprise. "You've seen the old mine," he said. "Heard the breathing. That means the town's noticed you." I asked about the photographs. He nodded slowly. "Those graves don't stay filled," he said. "We bury things. The earth doesn't keep them." He walked me to a back room, unlocked a drawer, and pulled out a dusty register. Inside were names, hundreds, each listed with a date of death, cause, and a final column labeled resolved. Most of them were marked no. Then I found it. My grandfather's name, Jonas Thorne, died July 8th, 1971. Cause, fell into earth, resolved. Body never found. There was a note beside it in red ink. Woke once, spoke once, forgot again. Back at the motel, I finally opened the folder labeled Dream Reports, 1974. It was a government document, stamped and authorized, duplication prohibited, detailing a short-lived research project conducted by a classified branch of the Department of Energy. They were studying shared dream phenomena in isolated populations. Hollow Creek had been one of 5 test sites. All the participants described a mine or shaft, a whispering figure beneath the earth, a sense of looping time, a wound that bleeds memory, and all terminated participation within 2 weeks. Several disappeared. One left behind a journal with the last entry. "The clocks here don't keep time, they feed on it." That night I left the motel and walked back to the mine entrance. Something in me said I'd already done this before, a memory I couldn't reach, like trying to recall a dream you haven't had yet. The wind was still, no stars, and when I reached the shaft's edge, I saw that it had changed. The timbers were now splintered, clawed from the inside, and something hung above the entrance. It was a rope tied into a noose, swinging gently, and when that wasn't there, I turned to leave, and saw Lena, the newcomer, the one who'd arrived a week before me. She stood 50 feet away, barefoot in the dust, whispering to herself. Her eyes were wide and glassy, like she was watching a movie only she could see. When I called her name, she didn't react, just said, "They pulled something up that shouldn't have been named. It didn't kill them, it learned them. Now it's just waiting for the rest of us to remember." She blinked, then turned and walked into the dark without another word. That night my dream was realer. I was buried alive, not by earth, but by names, pages falling on me, each with my signature. Family records, census documents, deeds of ownership. I screamed until my lungs burned, and from somewhere outside the pages, a voice whispered, "You're not digging to learn. You're digging to finish what they started." I woke to find my motel room door wide open, and a single boot print, my own, leading out into the night. I followed my own footprint out into the night. There was no moon, only the soft static of stars half drowned in dust. The town was asleep or pretending to be. Windows dark, curtains drawn, no dogs barking. Not even the whine of cicadas, just the dry hush of a place holding its breath. I walked toward the edge of town, past the gutted diner, the post office frozen in 1972, the collapsed chapel with no cross. My boot print turned left at the statue in the roundabout, a crumbling likeness of a man whose face had been eaten by wind. The plaque at the base simply read, "Remember him," but the name had been scratched off. The trail led me to a place I hadn't seen before, though the map said it had always been there, a house 3 stories tall, Victorian bones sunk into desert rot. The porch leaned sideways, the front door hung open. It shouldn't have stood that long in a climate that devours things, but there it was, like something the town refused to forget. I stepped inside. The air was still, thick with the smell of sage, and something sweetly rotten, the kind of smell that clings to you, not just your clothes, but your thoughts. Wallpaper hung in strips, a piano against the wall held keys pressed down by unseen hands, and in the parlor was a portrait, a man standing beside a boy. The man looked just like me. The boy was me, same face, same scar on the cheekbone I got falling from my bike at age 6. My knees went weak. The floor groaned under my weight. I stepped backward, and the door slammed shut behind me. Not with force, with certainty, like the house had been waiting. The rest of the night is ... fog, like trying to recall a dream from childhood. I remember stairs, clocks ticking out of rhythm. I remember mirrors where my reflection blinked out of sync. I remember the sound of someone sobbing behind a locked door, and a hallway that ended in a dead end, then didn't. And in the attic, something worse, a room full of drawings, hundreds of them, each one a child's sketch. Stick figures, landscapes, monsters with too many eyes, all signed the same. Jonas Thorne, age 9, my grandfather. I hadn't known he was born here. The last drawing was newer, sharper. It was me standing in front of the mine. Below it, scrawled in charcoal, "You open IT again." I must have passed out. I woke on the floor with a mouth full of dust and blood on my palms, from my fingernails dug deep into my own skin. The sun was rising, dull and red, through broken slats in the attic window, and outside I could hear the low drone, a sound like wind, but layered, rhythmic, like a song with no melody. It was coming from underground. Back at the motel, the clerk was gone, desk empty, lobby door hanging open. The clock on the wall was spinning, not fast, but backward. The girl from the street, the one who'd drawn symbols in the dust, sat in my motel room, legs crossed on the floor, staring at the pocket watch. She didn't flinch when I opened the door. "You're not Elias Thorne," she said calmly. I stared at her, throat dry. "What do you mean?" She smiled. "You're just what he left behind." Before I could ask what that meant, she placed a watch on the ground and whispered something in a language I didn't understand. The air shifted, the walls hummed, and the lights flickered in a sequence. 3 long, 2 short, 1 long. Morse code. RED. Then she stood, kissed me on forehead, and walked out barefoot into the dust. That night the final dream came. No mine, no house, just the canyon. I was on my back, eyes to the sky, and above me the stars blinked out. Not all at once, but in a sequence, a spiral. They weren't going dark, they were closing, one by one. And in the darkness, something emerged, a shape I couldn't see, only know. A presence that didn't speak in words but wait. And from the canyon walls, carved deeper than erosion, came a voice that split reality at the seams. You are the fault line. I woke, screaming. Throat raw, blood on my pillow from where my nose had bled. The pocket watch was gone, but in its place, carved into the motel desk, were the words, You're finally remembering. I should have left. Every reasonable part of me, the Ph.D., the peer-reviewed papers, the part that once believed everything could be measured, screamed to get in the Jeep and never look back. But something about Hollow Creek wouldn't let me go. Or maybe something inside me had already returned. I walked the town that morning like a man underwater. The streets were rearranged. Buildings in the wrong order, landmarks out of place. The diner that had burned down in the 80s, now pristine. The general store boarded up when I passed it the day before, now bustling, windows gleaming. No people, just the evidence of people. And the sound, that same low, bone-deep frequency, growing louder. The town was dreaming, or remembering, and I was inside it. I made my way back to the library, hoping to ground myself. It was the only place that hadn't changed. The librarian was still at her desk, hands folded this time. Her eyes met mine. You're unmoored now, she said softly. Not time travel, not memory, something ... between. I asked what was happening to me ... She pulled a slim, hand-bound book from under the desk and pushed it across to me. On the cover, Echoes of the Faulted Mind by Elias Thorne. It was my handwriting. I flipped through it, pages crackling like dried leaves, notes I hadn't written yet, sketches of the mind's spiral pattern, the same phrase scrawled over and over. Beneath understanding lies invitation. I looked up. This is a joke. She shook her head. You wrote it. In the year 1889, I left the library before I could feel myself vanish. The sun was high, but the shadows weren't right. They curved. I turned a corner and found the town's cemetery. A sign above the arch read, Silent burials only. I'd never seen it before. The graves were all shallow, most unmarked, but there was one in the center, larger, older, ringed with rusted bells on poles that jangled faintly in wind I couldn't feel. The headstone was cracked, but the name was clear, Elias Thorne, 1870 to 1901. He dug too deep into himself. I backed away, heart pounding, and someone behind me said, You remember now. It was Jacob, but different. His eyes were wrong, deeper set. To why? His voice echoed, like there were layers to it, like to people speaking slightly out of sync. You were the first to map the spiral, the first to hear the breathing and mistake it for earth settling. But it wasn't the mine, it was the town. I told him this was insane. He smiled. What do you think a town is? Really a structure, a cluster of buildings? No, it's a pattern, A collective memory pretending to be physical. Hollow Creek isn't built on cursed land, it is the curse. He reached into his coat and pulled out the pocket watch. It ticked once, and the entire town shivered. I turned and ran back toward the motel, toward anything familiar, but it wasn't there. Where the motel should have been was an open plain, empty, and I wasn't alone. They stood at the ridge, a line of figures, still as stones, dozens, maybe hundreds, all in dust-covered clothes, all staring at me, and I recognized every face, family portraits, old photographs, ancestors, all thorns, all dead. The last figure was me, not as I am now, but older, worn down, hair gray, eyes hollow. He held the pocket watch and said, "You opened it. You finished it. Now hold the shape." The town blinked, and I was elsewhere. A cave, but not the mine. Something older, deeper. Smooth walls carved by no tool. Spiraling inward, down, 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 and ahead of me. The pit, it pulsed. And the sound of all my dreams layered atop one another, filled the space, a voice that was my grandfather's and mine, overlapping. Time is the vein, memory is the marrow, you are the wound. I woke in the center of town, knees bleeding, hands shaking, and the last thing I saw before blacking out again was the sun reversing direction. I don't know how long I was unconscious. I woke to the sound of my own breath, shallow, panicked, echoing louder than it should in open air. The town was empty again, but not abandoned, just paused, like everything was waiting for me to move first. My watch was gone, not the pocket watch, mine, the modern one, the one I'd use to timestamp seismic readings. In its place, wrapped around my wrist, was something else, a leather strap buckled to a small stone disc edge with spiral grooves. I touched it, and something clicked in my mind. A memory that wasn't mine. A man in 1889, shirt soaked in dust and sweat, hands bleeding, holding the same stone disc, whispering to a wall of black rock. It's not a cave, it's a mouth. Back in the library. Though I don't remember walking there, I flipped open the book the librarian had given me. Echoes of the vaulted mine. The pages had changed. There were new entries, dated tomorrow, in my handwriting. They described the events of the past 24 hours, word for word. Then, one entry. Do not speak to Martha. She remembers too much. She show you the bell. I slammed the book shut and ran. Martha lived on the outskirts. A rusted trailer sunk into the dust, surrounded by dead cottonwoods. I don't know why I went. Maybe to defy the warning. Maybe because warnings don't mean anything here. She was waiting on the porch, knitting something with black thread that had no beginning. I saw you, she said before I spoke. In the spiral, you touched the center. I asked what the town was, what I was. Why none of this made sense. She smiled without warmth. Because you're trying to use a map to understand a song I didn't follow. She nodded. I didn't either. Not until the bell. She stood, went inside, returned with a box, small, carved from petrified wood. She handed it to me with shaking hands. Inside, the bell, made of bone, carved with the same spiral, etching from the stone disc. I touched it and saw flashes, fire, collapsing tunnels, a body split open and filled with names, and a sound not made for ears. The sound of remembering something that has never happened. I dropped the bell. It rang once, and the entire town moved. I stumbled back into town. The streets bent at impossible angles. Buildings were wrong, stacked like memories instead of structures. A door where a window used to be, a schoolhouse with no doors, a church that hummed like a tuning fork. I found Jacob waiting in the center square, leaning against the statue. "You heard it," he said. I nodded, voice gone. He looked at the sky. "The bell's the key, but it doesn't unlock. It summons what I managed." "What does it summon?" He met my eyes. His were no longer human. "It doesn't summon a thing, Elias. It summons understanding. And that's what kills you." That night, the dream was more than a dream. I stood in the pit again, the one that spiraled down forever, the walls pulsed with carvings, timelines, equations, fingerprints, faces mine, others. At the center was a shape. It looked like a person, until it moved. Then it was all of them. Every person I've ever known, every ancestor, every possible version of me, speaking in a single voice. We built the town to bury it. Then we buried the town, but you dug too far. You made it, remember? I screamed, and the spiral walls closed in. And as they did, I heard the sound of the bell again, and behind it, the ticking. Not from a watch, from the earth itself. I woke to find dirt under my fingernails. My bed was gone. I was in the old mine, standing at the threshold of the sealed shaft, the one marked Hollow 3. Only now it was open and carved into the lintel above the entrance, in the same handwriting as the journal. "You made it a wound, now finish the cut." The mine's mouth waited like it knew I was coming. No wind, no sound, just a depthless black that drank every trace of light. The wooden beams above the shaft creaked, not from age, but from something remembering their collapse. I crossed the threshold, and the temperature dropped, not cold like weather, cold like absence, like stepping into a memory that never warmed to begin with. The first 100 yards were familiar. Rusted rails, collapsed carts, pickaxes fossilized in the walls. But then the tunnel curved, not in any natural trajectory. It spiraled downward, always downward. The deeper I went, the more the air thickened, with something like pressure or expectation. My flashlight flickered, dim, then steadied, casting shadows that moved a fraction behind my own. Then I found the first body, or what was left of it, a miner's skeleton, hunched against the wall, arms crossed, mouth open in a silent scream. Beside him, carved into the stone in blood, it spoke in my father's voice. I pressed on. The walls began to change. No longer rock, but polished stone, smooth as glass, etched with a spiral symbol again and again, overlapping, warping. Sometimes faces emerged in the patterns, sometimes names. One of them was mine. Another was mine spelled wrong. The tunnel split into 3 paths, each identical. But I didn't choose. My feet did. That's the worst part. The way your body begins to obey something else down here. Not fear, not instinct, something deeper, recognition. The spiral opened into a chamber, massive, dome-shaped. The center of it all, in the middle, was a pit. Not just a hole, a negative space. I couldn't see the bottom, but I knew it went down further than the canyon ever could. It radiated heat and sound. Low, layered just below hearing, I stepped closer. And the closer I came, the more I felt the thoughts, not my own, Thoughts pressed through me fragments. The wound can only be closed by the last to open it. Time is a habit, not a fact. What you bury returns to you with interest. The thorn must complete the spiral. Then I saw it, a shape rising from the center of the pit, not climbing, just arriving. At first I thought it was a figure, a man, but it was too tall, too thin. Its body rippled, as if made of stacked moments, not flesh. Its face shifted between people I knew. My mother, my grandfather, Jacob, me. It spoke without sound. You left me unfinished. I tried to run. I didn't move. My legs were no longer mine. The entity stepped forward, or more accurately, it stepped me forward. And it said, "You are not the one who returned. You are the one who stayed. You never left. You just stopped looking at yourself." It reached toward me, not to grab, but to merge. I blacked out. I came to at the edge of the pit. No figure, no voice, just the bell lying beside me, ringing once, and a voice, my own voice, from inside the mine's walls. The spiral doesn't lead down, it leads in. I crawled out of the shaft, sunlight burning like betrayal. The town stretched before me, unchanged, waiting. But when I looked behind, the mine entrance was gone. Just smooth cliff wall, like it had never been there at all. I walked back into Hollow Creek. People were on the streets now, talking, smiling, as if nothing had happened, as if the town hadn't twisted, folded, reassembled itself around me. I saw Lena. She waved, casually, like none of it mattered. "You made it out," she said. "You remembered what it wanted you to forget." I asked her what the spiral was. She just smiled. "It's the town, the real one, not this memory you're walking through." Then she turned and vanished into a door that hadn't been there before. I went back to my motel room. The watch was on the pillow, ticking, and inside the cover, the message had changed. "You're not done." The watch wouldn't stop ticking. I left it in the drawer, wrapped it in a towel, buried it under the motel floorboards with my boot heel. I could still hear it, not through my ears, but in my teeth. That night I walked the town again. Everything had the texture of reenactment, like the town was going through the motions of being a town. People laughing, dogs barking, porch lights flickering, but none of it had weight. The air was too clean, the colors too sharp. Even the shadows felt painted on. I passed the statue in the roundabout again. This time the nameplate was back, clear. Dr. Elias Thorne, 1870 to 1901. Our sacrifice. I reached for it, but the plaque was warm. No, hot, like something underneath it was still alive. At the library, the door was ajar inside. Every book had been pulled from the shelves and stacked in spirals on the floor. The librarian was gone, but her chair still rocked gently. In the center of the spiral stacks was a new volume, bound in cracked leather. No title. I opened it. Every page was blank, except the last. A single sentence written in my hand. "We are not the ones who returned, we are the ones who stayed." I dropped the book, and all the clocks in the town struck midnight at once, no matter their actual time. The sound hit like a concussion. My knees buckled, then the doors began to open. From every house, every storefront, every abandoned shack, people stepped out, slowly, silently, but not the townsfolk I'd seen before. These were different. Their faces were familiar, mine, in different ages, different expressions, worn and broken, and proud and horrified. All versions of me, dozens, hundreds. They lined the streets, watching, waiting. One stepped forward. He looked older, gaunt, eyes sunken and full of dust. He held the pocket watch, and in a voice cracked by memory, he said, "You stayed too long. Now we all have to carry it." I tried to speak, but my throat locked. He stepped closer, pressed the watch into my palm. It didn't tick anymore, it breathed. Suddenly I remembered everything, not as memories, but as places I had been, lives I had lived, across decades, across collapses, across every time someone named Thorne had returned here and dug. I hadn't just come to Hollow Creek. I had always been here. The town grew out of me. The older version of me turned, gestured to the horizon. There, in the desert heat, stood the spiral. But this time, it wasn't a mine, it was a structure, a tower, twisting downward into the sand like a drill of stone and bone and black iron. A church with no God, a root system of memory. A place built not to worship, but to contain. I heard a voice from inside me, from all of me. Close the spiral or become the spiral. I stepped toward it, and all the other me's followed. We crossed the desert in silence. The sand didn't crunch beneath our boots. It parted like it remembered us. The sun hung low, unmoving. The horizon warped as if time couldn't quite stabilize here. Ahead, the spiral, no longer abstract, no longer metaphor, a real structure, descending into the earth, wider than I could have imagined, a funnel of stairs and balconies, buttresses carved with glyphs I half understood and fully feared. From its center came that same resonance, the infrasound hum that lived in dreams and bones. Each step closer made it harder to breathe. One of my others, a version of me with burned scars and a limp, whispered, "It's not a tower." What is it? A cage. We entered through the breach, a great archway at the base. Inside, light behaved differently. It bent wrong, like it was remembering where it used to fall. Every wall was carved in the spiral script. The symbols pulsed, slowly rotating. Not decorative, active. They watched. We descended together. 50 of me, maybe more, some muttering, some weeping. All of us bearing the weight of having known too much. Each level we passed seemed older than the last. One built in concrete, one in bone, one in a black stone that reflected nothing. On the 6th level down, we found the tombs, not sealed coffins, open slabs, each one holding someone who looked like a thorn, each one still breathing, barely. I recognized my grandfather, my great-grandfather. Others I knew only from photos or census records. They never left. One of me said, the spiral held their minds, stretched them thin across memory. Another version of me placed a hand on one of the bodies. He spoke to me in my sleep, kept telling me to dig, to finish the cut. Deeper, the spiral narrowed, became less a building, more wound. The walls grew slick with condensation that tasted of rust and rain. The light flickered in a language, a rhythm, a sequence I'd seen before in seismic waves. Triplet, pause, triplet, pause, the pulse of something ancient pushing against its cage. At the final platform, we found the truth, the center. A chamber shaped like an eye, round, dome, lidless. In the center stood the final figure. It was me, not a copy, not a version, the origin. Tall, naked, eyes closed, breathing slow and deep. His skin was etched with every symbol, every story, every name. One of the others whispered. He stayed when we tried to leave. So the town built itself around him. Another, he became the spiral, and now it dreams through us. I stepped forward. I didn't want to. I had to. My other self stopped. Watch, I approached the figure, my breath shallow, my hands shaking. And then he opened his eyes. They weren't eyes. They were holes into the spiral. And I fell into them. I saw everything. Not metaphor, not vision. Everything. The first digging. The first death, the bell's creation, the town forming around a fracture in reality that wasn't supposed to open, generations trying to cover it, forget it, leave it, and me, Elias Thorne, always returning, in every century, every collapse, always pulled back to finish the cut, because I was the origin, the one who broke the barrier. The first to listen, the first to answer. I came back to myself on the floor of the chamber, alone. All the other versions, gone, fated, released, except one. Jacob, he stood where the figure had been. Not wearing my face, but holding it, literally a mask, my own face, carved in bone. You're the last loop, he said, when you accept it. When you remember it all at once. The spiral closes. I looked at the pocket watch, still ticking, only now it ticked backward. I walked to the center, the eye, the mouth. I placed the watch on the stone and said the words I'd never spoken aloud, but always known. I was the wound. Let me be the scar. The watch stopped. The spiral screamed. Stone shattered, lift cracked, the hum ceased, not in silence, but in a sudden, unbearable stillness. Then everything went white. I woke up alone in the motel room. Clean sheets, no blood, no dust, sunlight warm and real. The watch was gone. The town was ... normal ... People walked dogs. Kids played with chalk. Ashby's was open. The church had a choir inside. I walked outside, dazed, and saw the statue again. Same plaque, same name, but this time it said, Dr. Elias Thorne, 2025. The question mark was fresh. The spiral wasn't closed, just ... waiting. For 3 days I walked Hollow Creek like a man awake inside someone else's dream. Everything looked right, but nothing felt right. People spoke in complete sentences that left their eyes behind. The food tasted like memory. The water came out of the taps already warm, like it had been through something. Even the air had a new flavor. Like dust mixed with static, I saw Lena again. Sitting on the church steps, barefoot, humming that dissonant tune I couldn't quite place. She looked up, smiled, and said, You climbed down far enough to find the bottom of yourself. That's good. I asked her if it was over. She shook her head. You just close your part of the spiral. There are more, buried, breathing, hungry. Then she handed me a piece of paper, folded 12 times. Inside, the photograph of a hospital room. Me in a bed, unconscious, tubes in my arms. Where did you get this? She tilted her head. From the version of you that never left the asylum. I ran back to the motel, back to the books, the maps, the data. Anything to prove this place had substance, that I hadn't fractured completely. But the maps were blank, the journals unreadable. Every paper in my bag was just pages of spirals, 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 I screamed until I tasted blood. The motel mirror didn't show me, it showed Jacob. Not the real Jacob, the first Jacob, the one who found the bell, the one who carved the spiral in the canyon wall with a pickaxe made of memory. He mouthed a phrase I didn't hear, but somehow understood. It's not about forgetting. It's about holding it all at once. I collapsed that night, sank into a sleep so deep I wasn't sure it was sleep. In the dream, I stood on a vast plain of ash. Above me, no sky, just a lid, a stone lid, carved with shifting versions of my name. The spiral hovered in the air, massive, endless, alive. It breathed, and when it exhaled, the world bent inward. Everything folded into a single point, a small black stone. I picked it up and felt all time collapse inside my palm. I saw every ancestor, every mistake, every voice I'd ever heard in the mine. I saw the moment Hollow Creek was born, not from settlement, but from regret. I saw a child lost in the desert, speaking to something beneath the ground. And that child was me. Again and again and again. I woke with the stone in my hand, the real one, rough, cold, carved with the spiral, same as the disc from before. This time I didn't drop it. I bit down on it, and something inside me snapped back into place, a puzzle piece that had been missing my whole life, not from memory, but from perception. Suddenly the town made sense, not the buildings, the geometry. Everything was shaped like the spiral, every path, every sound, every street, even the gaps between people's words. It had always been a signal, and I had always been the receiver. That afternoon, I walked to the ridge above Hollow Creek, looked down at it from above, and I saw it clearly for the first time. The entire town was shaped like the spiral, and in the center of that spiral, directly under the roundabout, was the bell, buried, still ringing. I could hear it now, not with ears, but with memory, and that's when I knew. The town wasn't healing, it was infecting. It wasn't trying to be forgotten, it was waiting to be reborn through me. Through whoever came next. The scar was still bleeding, and something beneath it smiled. I couldn't sleep anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I didn't dream. I remembered. Not my life, others who wore my face, others who dug too deep, others who were dug up. I walked the perimeter of Hollow Creek through the night, pacing the edges of something invisible. The coyotes stopped howling around midnight. The wind refused to move east. The stars above the town didn't match any known constellation. Time was coming undone here, and something was using the unraveling as a door. The next morning, the town woke up. Too quickly, people moved in sync. Conversations repeated word for word. I watched a man spill coffee on his shirt at the exact same second as the day before, right down to the apology he gave to no one. It wasn't deja vu. It was script, and the spiral was directing the play. I ran into Martha again, the old woman who'd shown me the bell. She wasn't knitting this time. She was sitting in a circle of white ash, eyes rolled back. When I stepped closer, she spoke in a voice that wasn't hers. It walks the spiral now. I froze. What does? She turned her head to me like her neck was broken, the thorn that remembered too well, the one that stayed. It woke something that forgets on purpose. Then she blinked and screamed, a sound like stone grinding against itself. A scream pulled through a throat that had been dust for centuries. And then she was gone, just dust and the wind. Nothing left but a small spiral etched into the dirt with her finger still warm. That was the moment I stopped pretending this could be explained. No more seismology, no more data, no more rationalizations. This wasn't science. This wasn't madness. It was a third thing, and I was in its middle. I went back to the roundabout. The statue was gone. In its place, a sinkhole, a perfect circle, 10 feet wide, no rubble, no debris, just the spiral, descending in dark stone steps, no bottom. I looked around. The townspeople were gone. The windows rise again, watching, blinking. And behind me I felt it, the thing that walks the spiral. I didn't turn around, I just heard it breathe. Like memory itself inhaling, and then footsteps, soft, wet, familiar. I turned and saw myself, paler, taller, mouth wrong, eyes missing. It spoke without sound. You're what I shed to walk. I ran, but the town folded. The street beneath my feet became hallway, became tunnel, became rib cage. I stumbled into Ashby's. The store was empty, except for one thing. On the counter, the pocket watch. No ticking, just a hum. And inside, a reflection. Not mine, the spirals. It looked like everything at once. It looked like my death. And it smiled. The voice returned inside me, around me. Below the floorboards of my thoughts, every thorn leaves a piece behind. You are that piece, and now you must walk. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out, only dust. I don't remember falling asleep. I only remember waking up underground. Not buried, placed. The dirt was soft, warm, like it had known me. When I opened my eyes, I saw the spiral again, not from outside this time, but from within. The walls curved inward, like ribs bent in prayer. I was deep below Hollow Creek, maybe beneath the mine, maybe beneath everything. I stood. The stone remembered my weight. The spiral welcomed me back. The air was different down here. Not stale, not dead, it was pregnant, full of moments that hadn't happened yet. And the sound dot, 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 the hum was gone, replaced by breathing. Rhythmic, deliberate, familiar, my own, and not. It echoed through the bones of the spiral, and with each breath the walls shifted just slightly. As if they were trying to align themselves with me, I turned a corner and saw him. The walking thorn, my reflection without reflection, my shadow with no source, taller now, skin cracked and dry eyes black with memory. He stepped forward, I did too. A mirror made a bone and intention dot, we stood inches apart. He leaned in and whispered, I was what you left behind to escape. Now I'm what comes back to finish you. Then he placed his hand over my chest, and I remembered what I'd forgotten to forget. I saw it all, the first cut, the first miner. The spiral's birth, not from digging, but from listening. The stone wasn't just matter, it was memory storage. The kind of memory that leaks into minds, the kind of remembering that replaces, and somewhere back in the late 1800s, a thorn, the first Elias, listened to closely. He didn't awaken a god, he created a mirror, a thing that reflects self into echoes, a feedback loop, a spiral, and every thorn after him, every generation, came closer to merging with the original wound, and now I had touched the center that made me the conduit. The spiral could walk through me. I tried to scream, but my voice collapsed into cymbals. The walking thorn opened his mouth, and from it came a flood of names. Every name I had ever been, every person I could have been. They poured into the chamber like insects. They crawled into my eyes, my ears, my thoughts, and in that moment I understood what the spiral wanted. Not death, presence. It didn't want to erase history. It wanted to wear it. Like a coat of skin, I fell to my knees. The spiral pulsed. I wasn't breathing anymore. The spiral was breathing for me. Each inhale filled me with its rhythm. Each exhale deleted a piece of my past. Then, silence, stillness, and the voice. There is no Elias thorn. There is only the walking wound. I stood, not as myself, as what the spiral had become through me. I looked at my hands, not cracked, not bleeding stone, etched with spirals, pulsing with names. Behind me I heard footsteps. Lena, Jacob, the girl with the chalk, the librarian, the others. All of them stepping forward, not surprised, like they'd been waiting for this, waiting for me to become the spiral skin. Jacob knelt and whispered, "Now we move." I didn't ask where, I already knew. Everywhere that night I walked out of Hollow Creek, and the town followed, but not with roads, not with wheels. It folded, it reassembled. It whispered itself into the cracks of other towns, other lives, other people who would feel something shifting beneath them. A tremor in the bones, a breath in the dirt. A name they didn't remember knowing, Thorn. Maps lie. They tell you what's there, not what's beneath. After I became the spiral skin, I stopped thinking in lines and borders. My thoughts turned circular, layered, recursive. I no longer remembered in sequence. I remembered in weight, in density. The first place I walked after leaving Hollow Creek wasn't a town. It was a fault line somewhere in New Mexico, a dust-stripped valley where the wind didn't blow the way it should. A woman stood on her porch, staring at nothing, and whispered, "The soul keeps showing me my father's dreams." I said nothing. I just stood beside her, and when my shadow touched hers, she remembered. Not her memories, mine. She fell to her knees and wept. When she stood again, she was part of it. Her eyes had changed. Her breath had rhythm. She could hear the spiral now. Each step I took opened fractures in thought. People I passed remembered towns that never existed, dreams that ended in screams, roads they'd never driven down, graves without names, and dames without graves. The spiral was growing, feeding not on fear, but familiarity, because deep down, everyone had felt it, that sense that something underneath us was watching, something patient, something old, something we'd mistaken for the ground itself. I walked until I reached an old church in Kansas, boarded up, built in the 1930s, abandoned in the 1970s. A man inside had been living alone for decades. He said he was waiting for the return of the silent sermon. He had a journal, a thick one. The last entry simply read, "The spiral is not a location. It's a language." He showed me his dreams. They weren't drawings, they were instructions. Spiral shapes filled with human figures, stepping over themselves, looping back, rituals that involved silence, stillness, remembering in reverse. He asked me what to do. I touched his shoulder and left. When I looked back, the church had vanished, not burned, not collapsed, just unwritten. That night I slept beside a dry riverbed, and I dreamed of Elias Thorne, the real one, the first. He sat at a desk in a one-room cabin, writing a letter he'd never send. It read, The spiral was never a thing I found. It was a thing I uncovered in myself. I cracked, and the world cracked with me. The town grew around the bowl, and every generation after me brought it closer to the surface. I was not the first to dig. I was the first to hear what answered. Now I write these words not to warn, but to witness, because you, whoever you are standing where I stood, and that means it's already inside you. He looked up from the page and said, "You're not walking anymore, are you? You're being carried." I woke with dirt in my mouth. The riverbed was full now with names. I turned on the GPS out of instinct. It GLITCHED ... refused to locate me. When it finally blinked in, the screen said, "Location, Hollow Creek. Date, July 8, 1971. Status, unresolved." I stared. Then the screen flashed once and I knew what was next. I was going home, not where I came from, but where I ended. The spiral doesn't open once. It opens when remembered, and I was remembering everything. The roads didn't take me back to Hollow Creek. Memory did. I walked for days through scrubland, collapsed barns, ghost highways, places that felt like half-finished dreams, places where the signs had no letters and the wind spoke in rhythms. Every step pulled me deeper into the pattern. And then one night I saw it, not from above, not as a traveler. I saw Hollow Creek from inside, as if I'd never left, as if I'd never been anywhere else. The town hadn't decayed, it hadn't aged, it had paused, waiting for my return, waiting to resume. The sky above was alit again, flat, bruised, and moving. The air smelled like rust and sage and witnessing. The roundabout was there, the statue gone. The sinkhole had widened, now the size of a small house, spiraling down like a mouth mouthing silence. No people, not this time, just doorways open, lights flickering like the town was breathing. And in the center of it all, the watch ticked. Not audibly, internally, ... I could feel it in my teeth, in my spine, in the rhythm of my thoughts. A countdown, not to an end, but to emerging. I stood at the edge of the spiral center. The hole was deeper now. I could see levels, floors, rooms, faces peering up. Some were mine, some used to be mine. They weren't begging, they were watching, like I was the final piece. And when I arrived, they could close the circle. Jacob was waiting for me, but he wasn't Jacob anymore. He was taller, skin drawn tight like paper stretched across bone, spiral marks carved down his neck like veins. He didn't speak at first, just placed a stone in my hand, smooth, warm, familiar. It was the first stone I'd unearthed as a child. The one that had started my obsession with fault lines. The one my grandfather had said remembered where it came from. I'd lost it 30 years ago, yet here it was, still warm, still breathing. Jacob finally spoke. We didn't bury it, we birthed it. And now it's ready to wake through you. He stepped aside. The spiral pulsed. The ground vibrated. Not in a quake, but in a contraction, like labor, like the earth preparing to deliver something unforgivable. I took one step forward, then another. The hole widened, the walls folded inward. And then Lena's voice, from nowhere, from everywhere, you can still choose. If you remember the shape of who you were. I stopped. The stone in my hand burned cold, the spiral throbbed. And I remembered something small, my name. Not Elias Thorne the pattern, not Thorne the wound, not Thorne the walker, just Elias, a man who once believed in rocks and reason, who once left. I stepped back. Jacob screamed, the spiral howled, and the ground split. From the earth rose every version of me that never stopped digging. Every possibility, every future where I let the spiral wear my skin. And from the sky, for the first time, came light, not sun, memory, raw and bright and searing. It hit me in the chest, and I saw the spiral's true shape. Not a hole, not a wound, a mirror, reflecting whatever stepped into it. Not evil, just echo, and echo needs a voice. I threw the stone into the pit. The spiral screamed, the buildings cracked, the roads twisted, and I said the words, not old, not sacred, just mine. I remember who I was, and I refuse to forget. And for the first time since this began, the spiral paused, silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty, but dangerous, as if the spiral were waiting to see what I'd do next. My refusal wasn't victory, it was interruption. And for a being, a structure, like the spiral, interruption was unthinkable. It didn't kill me, it did something worse. It showed me everything. I stood inside time, not as a moment, as a space. The spiral unspooled around me, miles wide, made of years, regrets, possibilities. Each curve of its body held a version of the town I'd never lived in. In one, I was a teacher, in another, a drifter. In another, a child who never made it past his 10th birthday, swallowed by a mine no one remembered digging. In every version, I found Hollow Creek. In every version, it found me. Because the spiral wasn't a single entity, it was a filter, a sieve made of memory, drawing in anyone who touched it, who dreamed near it, and shaking loose their weakest moment. It fed on recognition. It grew stronger when you saw it and said, I know this. I fell to my knees on a spiral of bone and stone and breath. I said my name out loud, again, until it sounded unfamiliar, until it sounded false, and still I said it, because that was all I had left. The spiral collapsed inward, not crumbling, condensing, pulling in all the versions of me, all the timelines, all the undone decisions. They screamed and merged and vanished, until only one remained, me, whole, wounded, but still me. I was back in the mind. The spiral was gone. Nothing but dust, no structure, no sound, no echo, just me, a flashlight in my hand, the rock walls quiet, cold. I climbed out, walked back to town. It was gone. No buildings, no statue, no roads, just scrubland. Like Hollow Creek had never existed. Or maybe, like it finally let go, I drove east for hours, then days. No GPS, no voice, just the ticking in my skull. And then one day, even that stopped. No more spiral, no more call, no more hunger beneath the bones, until last night. I stopped for gas in a town I didn't recognize. Old storefronts, dusty signs, no one on the street. And in the center of the town, a statue, and finished, no face, just a plaque at its base. To the one who remembered. I stepped out of the car and felt it again, faint, but there the hum the spiral had intended. It had just changed hosts, and now it walks. Because I'm still walking. Because some memories are too loud to forget, and some patterns, they just wait. I tried to live. Really, I did. Small towns, quiet jobs, a woman once. briefly, a cabin so far off-grid that even the bird seemed to forget it existed. But the spiral remembers. It doesn't punish you. It doesn't chase you. It just waits, then it arrives in you. It started small, a drawer that wouldn't stay closed, always open an inch, always holding the same stone, a door that opened into a hallway that didn't exist on the floor plan. A night where the moon hung still in the sky, like it was staring, and then blinked. And then came the dreams again. Not mine. Theirs the other thorns, buried, broken, whispering, "Let us forget you remembered too much." One morning I opened the cupboard for coffee and found a journal, not mine, leather-bound, brittle, unmarked inside, hundreds of pages, all in my handwriting, maps, diagrams, instructions, all leading back to a place that didn't exist anymore. But every road pointed there anyway, not geographically, psychologically. I stopped running, I started listening. I realized the spiral had stopped calling because I had finally answered, ... It no longer needed Hollow Creek. That town had been the training ground. Now the spiral lived in us, ... in every skipped memory. Every time you walked into a room and forgot why. Every dream you woke from remembering someone else's name. The spiral uses familiarity like bait. And you feed it every time you say, "I felt this before." So I built something, a machine, part geological scanner, part neural interface, part ritual. Something to test the spiral's range. To speak to it on its level, I hooked my mind into the sensor net, and it spoke back, not in words. In timelines, it showed me forks, variants, futures, some beautiful, some ashed. In most, I went mad. In one, I vanished entirely, not by death, but by integration. I became the town, the memory, the reminder, so I chose the only future it couldn't predict, the unpatterned one. I burned the journals, smashed the watch, scattered the stones, then I wrote this. Not as a warning, as a relay. You don't escape the spiral, you just become the next voice it uses. And now that you've heard it, it's in you too, you'll feel it soon. A whisper under your skin, a breath in the walls, a map that doesn't match the land anymore. And when it comes, when it calls you by name, don't answer, because if you do, you'll start to remember, and then the spiral will know where to find you. This will be the last thing I write, not because I've reached the end, but because I finally found the edge of what can be said without summoning it. If you've heard this much, you already know. It's in the skipped heartbeat when someone says your name in a dream. It's in the shape of the dirt when the wind moves wrong. It's in that feeling you can't explain, the one that says, "I've been here before," even when you know you haven't. That's not deja vu. That's the spiral checking in. I live in the woods now. No address, no trail, no name on the mailbox. But it still finds me. Last night I woke up with my hand around a stone I never picked up, etched with spirals, warm, breathing. I threw it into the fire. It didn't burn. It pulsed once and vanished, like it had found what it needed. I don't trust mirrors. I don't look at clocks. I don't write my name anymore unless I absolutely have to, because names anchor, and the spiral uses anchors to return. There's one more thing I need to tell you. One last truth I've been trying to forget for years. The spiral isn't alive in the way we understand it. It doesn't want. It doesn't choose, it just remembers. It remembers you long before you remember it. It's not evil, it's not good, it's hunger. A hunger that sounds like your own voice, feels like your own past, tastes like truth. If you see it, a shape in the ground, a familiar loop, a name whispered behind your eyes, don't trace it, don't acknowledge it, because the moment you do, the moment you say, I think I remember this ... that's when it knows you're ready. That's when it sinks its teeth into time and starts to pull. And you'll feel the spiral inside your blood, turning, always turning, looking for the center, looking for the beginning, looking for you. I'm going to walk into the forest now. There's a place I've seen in dreams, a clearing, a stone slab, a bell half buried in the moss ... and a whisper in the dirt. You remembered, that's enough. If someone finds this, my journals, this tape, this warning, you have to choose. Forget everything or start writing, because the spiral is a memory with teeth, and it's always hungry, and now it knows your name.